All right, so Eddie Hearn gave an interview on Fight Hub TV. Now, Everything Boxing have quoted Eddie Hearn here directly. This is on the Dubois versus Joshua rematch. Eddie Hearn on a potential Dubois Anthony Joshua rematch. He says here, and I quote, this is from Everything Boxing. I think it will be part of Riyadh season in Riyadh. Riyadh season runs from October end of February, early March. October to the end of February, early March. Anything within that period takes place in Riyadh. It would be a part of Riyadh season if it was to happen. Now, Eddie Hearn is not saying it will happen if it was to happen. So, in the immediate aftermath of Anthony Joshua with Daniel Dubois, the first fight, there was a lot of talk of rematches, and we were hearing stuff like, well, it's not a foregone conclusion that Joshua would just, boom, rematch, that's it. Apparently all parties have to agree to it. It's not just as straightforward as, I'm the challenger, I lost, but boom, rematch like that. No. So Eddie Hearn is not speaking on the rematch as a foregone conclusion or anything like that it's going to absolutely happen next. But that is the option. It seems like that's the preferred option for Eddie Hearn, certainly for Team Joshua as well, which is the Dubois rematch. Now, if it were to take place, as he says there, it would probably be February, March. And the date I was hearing originally, if it was to take place, was actually February. Late February, most likely. Right, now, if it was to take place in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, although Anthony Joshua has lost in Saudi Arabia, for me, and maybe I'm over-analysing things, I don't know, but Anthony Joshua certainly seemed a little bit more, I know post-Alexander Usyk, the second fight, he had that, big moment in the ring post-fight, but he's normally seemed, just for me, a little bit more comfy over there. It's not as big a crowd. They're a little bit more subdued because you're not dealing with, in Wembley Stadium's case, you're not dealing with, 90,000 screaming fans, all that stuff. There's alcohol, it's a little bit harder to come by, stuff like that. So he seemed, and you're not in your comfort zone. You're not in the UK. You're over there in Saudi Arabia. It's, it's different. And as well as that, it's taking place on Saudi time, which is taking place a lot later their time than it is ours. They're going to the ring at like 2 a.m, maybe even later than that sometimes in Saudi, which is about 11 o'clock our time. So he seemed a little bit more comfy over there. So that might help him. Might. Now, if it was to take place in February, say late February, it's not I suppose you could say it's roughly, that's not a great deal of time. I was thinking, I was like, actually, no, it happened in September. That's not a great deal of time to recover from a fight like that. And with Anthony Joshua, yes, he's gone back in with immediate rematches before. He went back in an immediate rematch with Andy Ruiz and was able to get that win in Saudi Arabia as well. I don't think that was in Riyadh. I think that might have been in Jeddah. I'm not 100% sure where that was, but I don't think it was in Riyadh. He was able to go back in and right the wrong. One, it was a much younger Anthony Joshua, for one. And two, he got beaten up against Andy Ruiz. He got dropped 4 or 5 times, but he wasn't taken out. And as well as that, he had success in that fight. He was outboxing Ruiz early on. He dropped Andy Ruiz. He engaged with him. He made a mistake. He got clipped. He never recovered. Then he got dropped again and again and again, and there you go. But in that fight, the blueprint was already there on how to beat Andy Ruiz. We seen that in the Joseph Parker fight. He knew what he did wrong, so he went back in there. I had no doubt in my mind Anthony Joshua could beat Andy Ruiz second time around, no doubt. I picked him to win. I thought he would win. But the problem is that a fight like that with someone like Anthony Joshua with his mindset, you're probably going to want to bring him back slowly. If you bring him back against Ruiz, he can right that wrong, yeah, but he's straight back in the firing line. And in less than 2 years later, he was in there against Alexander Usyk. So, there you go. 2 fights, really, if you think about it. He fought Pulev, then Usyk. So, within 2 fights, he was fighting, the elite, the cream of the crop. And I always felt that Joshua should have been brought along a little bit slower. He loses to Alexander Usyk in a fight in which he was completely outclassed. He had a little bits of success there, but he wasn't dropped all over the place like he was against Ruiz, but he was completely outboxed by a much, much, much better fighter on the night. I remember thinking, okay, that's altogether different because it wasn't like Joshua had much success there. There's ways I think he could have been better in there against Usyk, but that's easier said than done against the caliber of a fighter like Usyk. And as well as that, Usyk is not going to come in 20, 30 pounds heavier than he did in the first fight. Usyk, consummate professional, thoroughly. So I thought, okay, how are you going to win that rematch? It's going to be tough. It's going to be pretty damn tough. Then we hear talk of maybe step aside, all this. Doesn't happen. Go straight in, immediate rematch with Alexander Usyk. We all know what happened. He was better. He was better second time around. He definitely was, but it was still Alexander Usyk clearly winning. And then he has that moment in the ring. And you think at that point, right, what are they going to do now? And I thought they handled his comeback in the last year pretty well. They picked good fights for him. Let's say on paper they picked good fights for him. I think the Franklin fight first might have been a mistake. I think he needed to look devastating. I mean, maybe if you look back in hindsight, you'd say Otto Wallin would have been a better option first fight because he could have looked devastating against him. And it probably would have. But they did the comeback good. And now we're in the situation where he's gone in there against Daniel Dubois. Wasn't even competitive. Dropped multiple times and nearly knocked out cold. At the age of 35, haven't had a beating like that. To only be given, 5 months to recover. Psychologically, I don't think he's going to recover from that anytime soon. Physically, I think now at this point in his career, it's unlikely he'll recover from that in a short amount of time. And he was hit on the chin, on the head, plenty of times. He was nearly knocked out cold. He was nearly, I'm surprised he was able to get back up from the first knockdown in the first round. That was a heavy knockdown, very heavy. Anthony Joshua, I just don't think, I think against Daniel Dubois he's always going to struggle, but I think in such a short turnaround, I just think that has tears written all over it. I really do. It could be just a case of like one last roll of the dice. Let's see how it goes. You're not in the surroundings you were in the first time around, so that might help you. But February, March, even March, that's a big turnaround. That's a very, very quick turnaround for this fight. Having it in Saudi Arabia. Listen, when a rematch happens and the first fight was fairly one-sided, it's unlikely you'll get the same kind of fan appeal you will second time around. And especially, again, as I said, since the first fight was so one-sided in Dubois' favour. I mean, you might get a lot of fans wanting to see more of Dubois. I'm sure you will. But I don't think there's going to be much intrigue in comparison to some of Joshua's other fights. There'll still be a lot of intrigue, certainly. But in comparison to what he's had before, I don't see it. I really don't. Against Usyk in the rematch, yeah, you had intrigue because you thought, okay, no, Joshua wasn't, he was beaten, soundly beaten, but not beaten up, not damaged, you know? So I don't know how, yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know how they're going to be able to do this one. Now, it might not happen because Eddie Hearn, as I said, he's talking about a potential rematch. He's not actually flat out saying it will be a rematch. Potential. For Dubois, it makes a lot of sense to do that fight next because at the end of the day, you won it easy first time around. Even more money on the table this time. You're definitely the A side this time. You will be mentioned first. Your name will be on the poster first. You should, by right, 100% walk to the ring second. You should have walked to the ring second first time, really. You know, no use complaining about it when you agreed to it. You know, saying it's not right. Don Charles saying, well, it wasn't right we walked the ring second, but we agreed to it. Well, if it's not right, don't agree to it. Simple as. So Dubois will get the A-side treatment. Certainly he deserves that in terms of all those privileges. And yeah, you've beaten him soundly first time. He's not going to get any better second time. So yeah, why not? In terms of Joshua, listen, if he loses again, even more devastating. I mean, how do you come back from that? Like, I don't even know how he comes back from this one. But if he goes in there again and loses again, how do you come back from that? I really don't know. I really don't know. So it really is like with Joshua again, you know, when he fought Andy Ruiz, there was a lot of pressure on him because, you know, there was obviously potential fights with Wilder, with Fury waiting in the wings. He was able to get the job done against Alexander Usyk. I think it was after he lost to Usyk, he signed that deal with DAZN where he'd be like an exec with DAZN and have shares with them and stuff. So he was basically carrying the network at the time because the Saudis, Turki Al-Sheikh wasn't involved in boxing at the time. So DAZN, I mean, that was at a time where Conor Benn, Chris Eubank Jr. was a must, you know, it needed to happen because what other kind of pay-per-view fights were they looking likely to get, you know? Now, and again, that's all the pressure on Anthony Joshua. Now, is there even any pressure on him this time around? I think maybe for Joshua, no, because I don't think many people are going to expect much of him. So maybe that will actually help him in this rematch. that there's not as much pressure on him. Maybe he'll put pressure on himself, I don't know. But maybe that's the one saving grace you could say going into this rematch, is that, well, actually, no one's really expecting him to do any better this time around. So he could be a little bit more reassured in himself, in a sense of, I have no pressure, so let's just see what happens. Let's wait and see. Might not happen. Might not happen. Again, every boxing fight hub, Eddie Hearn being quoted, they're talking about a potential fight, not necessarily that it will happen next. So let's wait and see. Time will soon tell. Let me know your thoughts on a potential Joshua Dubois rematch happening in Saudi Arabia. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hope you enjoyed it, people. Smash the like button if you could. Subscribe, of course, if you haven't already. And for now, lads and lassies, I'll leave it there. Peace.